Dad demanded I quit my stupid photography. Said you'll never make a dime. I became a celebrity photographer, now he can't afford my rates for family portraits. Story 1. My name's Cyprian. I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh. It's one of those places where everyone knows everyone, and your business isn't really your business for long. My dad, Lowell, has always been a stubborn, hard-headed kind of guy. He worked at the local steel plant since before I was born, and he had this mindset that hard work meant blue-collar jobs, sweat, and sacrifice. Anything else wasn't real work to him. He's one of those guys who thought if you weren't coming home with grease under your nails, you were wasting your life. Then there was me. I was a quiet, artsy kid who never quite fit into his vision of what a man should be. While he was teaching my older brother, Ransom, how to fix cars in the garage, I was outside taking pictures with this old Polaroid camera I found in the attic. My grandpa used to use it, and it became my favorite thing in the world. I'd wander around our neighborhood snapping pictures of anything I thought looked interesting, the peeling paint on fences, puddles reflecting the sky, stray cats lounging on porches. To me, it was magic. To my dad, it was a waste of time. You'll never make a dime doing that, he said the first time he saw me with the camera. I must have been 10. I didn't even know what to say. It wasn't about money for me, I didn't even know people could get paid to take pictures back then. I just loved it. But that didn't matter to him. He didn't see value in anything unless it could pay the bills, and photography? That was just a hobby for rich people or weirdos, according to him. This became a running theme in my life. Every time I mentioned photography, he'd roll his eyes or make a snide comment. Still playing with that camera, huh? You know you can't eat pictures, right? When are you gonna grow up and pick something useful? He wasn't subtle, and he didn't hold back. It wore me down, but I didn't stop. By high school, I'd managed to save up for a better camera, a used Canon that I bought with the money I made mowing lawns and babysitting. That camera became my escape. I started taking photos for the school yearbook and even got a gig shooting little league games for the local paper. I wasn't making much, just enough to cover film and equipment, but I was building a portfolio and figuring out my style. I started dreaming about doing it for real, as a career. But every time I let myself think about it, my dad's voice was there, in the back of my mind, telling me I was stupid for even considering it. The breaking point came during my senior year. I'd applied to the School of Visual Arts in New York City, one of the top art schools in the country. I didn't tell my parents because I knew what Dad would say, and honestly, I wasn't sure I'd even get in. But I did. I got the acceptance letter in the mail, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I could actually make this work. When I finally told my parents, it went about as well as you'd expect. My mom was quiet, her usual way of staying neutral in every argument. But Dad? He blew up. Are you kidding me, Cyprian? You think I'm gonna pay for you to waste 4 years in New York? You're out of your damn mind. He started pacing the kitchen, ranting about how art school wasn't real school and how I'd end up broke and living in his basement. You'll never make a dime with that stupid camera, he said, pointing at it like it was some kind of weapon. I tried to argue, but there was no point. He'd already made up his mind. If you want to throw your life away, do it on your own dime. I'm not paying for this nonsense. That was it for me. I told him I didn't need his money. I'd figure it out myself. He laughed in my face. Good luck with that, he said. Let me know how that works out for you when you're flipping burgers. I left a week later. New York was overwhelming. I'd never been in a city that big, and I didn't know anyone. I rented a tiny room in a rundown apartment with 2 roommates who were just as broke as I was. Between tuition, rent, and food, I was constantly stressed about money. I worked 3 jobs, waiting tables, assisting a wedding photographer, and freelancing for a local paper, just to scrape by. I barely slept. Most nights, I'd lie awake wondering if Dad was right. Maybe I was throwing my life away. Maybe I wasn't good enough. But I kept going. Every time I felt like giving up, I'd grab my camera and head out into the city. I'd wander for hours, taking pictures of anything that caught my eye, the steam rising from manhole covers, street performers in Times Square, tired workers heading home on the subway. Photography was still my escape, even when everything else felt like it was falling apart. 3 years in, I caught a break. I was interning for a well-known fashion photographer, Xavier Solano, and one day, his assistant didn't show up for a big shoot. Xavier was panicking, and I offered to help. I ended up taking some behind-the-scenes shots that the magazine loved so much, they published them alongside the main spread. Seeing my name in the credits for the first time was surreal. I kept the magazine in my bag for weeks, just to remind myself it was real. That shoot opened doors I never thought were possible. Suddenly, people were calling me for work, small gigs at first, but they got bigger over time. I shot for local designers, then national brands. One day, I got a call from a pop star's team asking if I'd shoot her album cover. It felt like a dream. I went from barely scraping by to building a career I'd only ever imagined. I hadn't been home in years when I got the call about my cousin Lyle's wedding. My mom asked if I could come, and I figured it was time. When I showed up, it was weird. My dad looked older, more tired, but he still had that same gruff attitude. He didn't say much to me, just nodded when I walked in. Later, I found out he'd been in charge of finding a photographer for the wedding. Their budget was tight, and they wanted someone good but cheap. When I heard Dad was in charge of finding the photographer, I couldn't help but laugh a little. He'd spent my whole life telling me photography wasn't worth anything, and now he was the one hunting for someone to capture this big day. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched him awkwardly avoid eye contact every time we ended up in the same room. Eventually, he came up to me. "So, Cyprian," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "You're still doing that photo stuff?" I smiled. "Yeah, Dad. Still doing it." He nodded, like he wasn't sure what to say next. "Well, we've been looking for someone to shoot the wedding. Thought maybe you could help out. Just some family photos and stuff." There it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing out loud. "Sure, Dad," I said. "I could do that." His face lit up for a second. "Oh, great. But," I cut him off, "I have to warn you, I'm not exactly cheap." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have a rate. A professional rate." I pulled out my phone and opened my website, showing him my pricing page. His face turned pale as he stared at the numbers. "For weddings, my base package starts at $15,000. That includes pre-shoots, the ceremony, and editing. If you want additional coverage, like the reception, that's extra." "You've got to be kidding me," he sputtered. 15 grand? For pictures?" "Good pictures," I said, keeping my voice calm. "My clients are happy to pay it." He looked like he was choking on his own tongue. "Cyprian, we don't have that kind of money." I shrugged. "Well, I'd love to help, but this is my job, Dad. I can't just give away my work for free." He started to argue, but I held up my hand. "Look, I'm sure you can find someone else. There are plenty of photographers around here who'll do it for a lower price. But if you want me, this is what it costs." He stormed off, muttering under his breath, and I could feel my mom glaring at me from across the room. But I didn't care. For years, he'd belittled me, mocked me, and tried to crush my dreams. Now he needed me, and I wasn't about to let him off the hook. In the end, they hired a local photographer for a couple $100. The pictures were not great. The lighting was off, half the shots were blurry, and the family group photo had someone blinking in almost every frame. Dad didn't say anything about it, but I caught him looking at my Instagram later, scrolling through my portfolio. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. After the wedding, I stayed in town for a few days to catch up with my mom and some old friends. On my last night there, Dad and I ended up alone in the living room. He was nursing a beer, staring at the TV, but I could tell he wasn't really watching it. Finally, he cleared his throat. He said, not looking at me, "You've done all right for yourself." It wasn't much, but coming from him, it felt like a parade and a marching band. I didn't say anything at first, just let the silence stretch out between us. Then he added, "I guess I didn't really see it back then. What you were trying to do." I nodded, keeping my tone steady. "Yeah, Dad. I know." He sighed and took another sip of his beer. "I should have been more supportive. I just didn't get it." This was as close to an apology as I was ever going to get, and for once, I didn't feel the need to push for more. "It's fine," I said. "But Dad, I didn't need you to get it. I just needed you to believe in me." He nodded slowly, like he was chewing on my words. "Yeah. I see that now." And that was it. We didn't hug, we didn't cry, but something shifted between us. For the first time in my life, I felt like he saw me, not as the kid who didn't live up to his expectations, but as someone who had built something real, something worth respecting. I flew back to New York the next day, leaving the small town and all its baggage behind. A week later, I got an email from Dad. It was short and awkward, just like him, but it was the first time he'd ever reached out to me on his own. Subject line, family photos. Message. "Hey, Cyprian. Your mom and I were talking, and we'd like to get some family portraits done. Let me know if you're available. We'll pay your rate." I stared at the screen for a long time before typing my reply. "Hi, Dad. Thanks for reaching out. I'd love to do it. Let me know when you're free. Family discounts apply, of course. Sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about showing the people who doubted you that you didn't just survive, you thrived. And maybe, just maybe, they'll finally see the value in what you've built." Story 2. My mother-in-law, Agatha, showed up uninvited on my honeymoon. I sent her packing, but not before she made a public scene so dramatic I still cringe thinking about it. Let me start at the beginning because, trust me, this story is something else. To set the stage, I married my husband Cyrus a few months ago. He's an amazing man, kind, supportive, and everything I could have hoped for in a partner. The problem? He's got a mother who thinks the world revolves around her. Agatha has always been extra. She's the type who will offer unsolicited advice about everything, from what you're wearing to how you're living your life. She's also got this way of making you feel like no matter what you do, it's wrong, and you should have done it her way. Planning the wedding was my first real taste of what I was in for. Agatha wanted to control every single detail. She tried to dictate the venue. It had to be a church, the guest list, she kept adding random cousins I'd never heard of, and even my dress, she called it too modern because it didn't have sleeves. At first, I tried to let it slide because I wanted to keep the peace, but by the time she suggested a 3-hour slideshow of Cyrus's childhood for the reception, I had to put my foot down. Cyrus backed me up, but it was clear Agatha was not happy about losing control. Fast forward to the wedding day. Despite all the stress she caused leading up to it, I was determined to enjoy myself. The ceremony was beautiful, and I'll never forget the way Cyrus looked at me as I walked down the aisle. For a brief moment, I thought maybe Agatha would behave. That illusion shattered at the reception. Agatha decided to make a toast. She didn't ask us ahead of time, she just grabbed the microphone and started talking. At first, it seemed harmless enough. She shared some stories about Cyrus as a kid, which were actually kind of sweet, but then she started talking about how she raised him to be the perfect man and how a mother's love is unmatched. She even threw in a comment about how no one will ever love Cyrus the way I do. It was awkward, to say the least. I just smiled and sipped my champagne, trying to play it cool, but I could feel the tension in the room. After that, I thought the worst was over. I mean, how much trouble can someone cause after the wedding is done? Turns out, a lot. For our honeymoon, Cyrus and I planned a week-long trip to Maui. We booked a stunning resort with an ocean view, excited for some much-needed alone time. The first 2 days were pure bliss. We relaxed on the beach, sipped cocktails by the pool, and spent our evenings watching the sunset. It was everything we'd dreamed of. And then Agatha showed up. It happened on the morning of our third day. I was lying by the pool, soaking up the sun, when I saw her walking toward us. At first, I thought I must be imagining things. There was no way Agatha could actually be here. But as she got closer, I realized it was really her, complete with her oversized sun hat and designer sunglasses. She waved like she'd just run into us at the grocery store. "Surprise," she said, grinning like this was completely normal. I was speechless. Cyrus, who had just come back with drinks, nearly dropped them. "Mom?" he said, his voice somewhere between shocked and annoyed. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I just couldn't bear to be so far away from my baby boy," she said, setting her bag down on a lounge chair like she owned the place. "I thought it would be fun to surprise you. I booked the room right next to yours. Isn't that great?" No, it was not great. I tried to stay calm. "Agatha, this is our honeymoon. We came here to spend time alone." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about me. I won't bother you. I just wanted to be close in case you needed anything." Needed anything? From her? On our honeymoon? Cyrus, bless his heart, tried to reason with her. "Mom, this isn't okay. We're here to have some time to ourselves. Maybe you could change your reservation?" Agatha's face immediately fell. "Are you saying you don't want me here?" Her voice was trembling, like we'd just told her she wasn't invited to Christmas. "I can't believe this. I thought you'd be happy to see me. I'm just trying to be part of your lives." At this point, I was done. I knew exactly what she was doing, turning on the waterworks to make Cyrus feel guilty. And it was working. He started fumbling, trying to find a way to appease her without upsetting me. But I wasn't about to let her ruin our honeymoon. "Agatha," I said firmly, "this isn't about you. This is our time as a couple. You need to leave." She stared at me like I'd just insulted her entire family tree. "I knew you'd do this," she snapped. "You've been trying to come between me and Cyrus since the day you met him." "Well, I'm not going anywhere." "Oh, really? Watch me." I marched straight to the concierge desk and explained the situation. They were incredibly understanding and helped me book Agatha a one-way ticket home for the next morning. I paid extra for an early flight, hoping she'd take the hint. When I handed her the confirmation, she looked like she might explode. "You can't do this," she yelled. "I'm your family. How dare you treat me like this?" "Agatha, you have two choices," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "You can enjoy your last night here and leave peacefully in the morning, or I can have security escort you out." She stormed off, muttering something about how I was ruining everything. Cyrus stayed quiet, but I could tell he was relieved I was handling it. He's not great at standing up to her, and honestly, I didn't blame him. She's exhausting. The next morning, we drove her to the airport. That's when things got truly chaotic. Agatha refused to go quietly and caused such a scene that I half expected the TSA to get involved. She was sobbing, yelling, and at one point tried to bribe an airline employee to let her stay. "My son needs me," she wailed, clutching her pearls like this was some kind of soap opera. I stayed in the car, letting Cyrus deal with her. By the time he came back, he looked completely drained. "She's on the plane," he said, slumping into the seat. I don't know how you stayed so calm. After the airport meltdown, we thought the drama was over. Cyrus and I spent the rest of our honeymoon trying to salvage the mood, and to some extent, we succeeded. The resort was beautiful, the sunsets were breathtaking, and for the first time, we had a real conversation about Agatha. She's always been like this, Cyrus admitted over dinner one night. She makes everything about herself, and I've never known how to push back without her guilt tripping me. Well, I said, sipping my wine, it's time she learns there are consequences for crossing boundaries. We're married now. It's us first, not her. He nodded, and I could tell he meant it. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. But little did we know, Agatha wasn't done causing chaos. When we got back home, we were greeted by a storm of drama. Agatha had wasted no time spinning her own version of events to the family. According to her, I had kicked her out of the honeymoon and disrespected her as the mother of the groom. She called me controlling, ungrateful, and even claimed I was trying to alienate Cyrus from his family. Her little smear campaign worked on some people. Cyrus's aunt, Lillian, called him up and scolded him for letting his wife bully his mother. His cousin Theo sent me a nasty text saying I needed to apologize. Even Cyrus's dad, who divorced Agatha years ago, called to say, what the hell happened in Maui? But the worst part? Agatha started showing up at our house unannounced. She'd knock on the door with homemade casseroles and a big smile, acting like nothing had happened. I just thought I'd drop by and check on you too, she'd say, breezing past me into the living room. It didn't matter how many times we told her to call first or that we needed space. She acted like our house was hers. Enough was enough. I sat Cyrus down one night and said, we have to do something. She's not going to stop unless we make her. What do you mean? He asked, looking wary. I mean, we're going to teach her a lesson. At first, he was hesitant. Cyrus isn't the confrontational type, but he eventually agreed that something had to change. Together, we came up with a plan, one that would finally show Agatha she couldn't steamroll us anymore. The first step was getting a smart home security system. We installed cameras, changed the locks, and set up an intercom so we could answer the door without actually opening it. The next time Agatha showed up unannounced, I greeted her through the intercom. Hi, Agatha. We're busy right now, I said sweetly. Oh, I just need a minute, she chirped. I made your favorite cookies. Sorry, but you didn't call ahead. We'll see you some other time. She stood there, stunned, as the camera recorded her reaction. Then she started knocking louder, demanding to be let in. I ignored her until she eventually left, fuming. The next step? We stopped attending every family event she organized. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, random Sunday brunches. If Agatha was hosting, we declined. And when other family members asked why, we were honest. She doesn't respect our boundaries, Cyrus would say. We need space until she learns to respect us as adults. It was tough at first. Some relatives sided with her, calling us selfish or dramatic. But others started to see the pattern. They noticed how Agatha always played the victim and how she couldn't go a single day without inserting herself into our lives. Then came the final step of the plan, one I'll admit was a little petty, but oh, so satisfying. Agatha's birthday was coming up, and she always threw herself a huge party. She sent out her usual invitations, complete with a wish list of expensive gifts she expected from everyone. But this year, we decided to turn the tables. Instead of attending her party, we booked a weekend getaway at a cozy cabin in the mountains. While we were there, we posted pictures on social media, hiking trails, sipping cocoa by the fireplace, and generally living our best lives. We didn't even mention her birthday. She blew up our phones with angry messages. How could you miss my party? She texted Cyrus. Do you even care about your own mother? But the real kicker? We sent her a birthday card with a gift certificate. For a therapy session. In the card, we wrote, we thought this might help you work through your feelings. Wishing you all the best. She lost it. She called Cyrus, screaming about how ungrateful we were and how no one has ever disrespected me like this. But Cyrus held firm. Mom, he said calmly, we love you, but your behavior has been toxic. Until you're ready to respect our boundaries, we need distance. And you know what? It worked. Agatha went radio silent for weeks. She didn't call, text, or show up uninvited. It was like she didn't know how to respond to someone finally standing up to her. Over time, she started to back off. She still has her moments, but she knows we're not afraid to enforce our boundaries. And for the first time in years, Cyrus and I feel like we're in control of our lives. Revenge isn't always about grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, it's about setting boundaries, sticking to them, and showing someone they can't mess with you anymore. Agatha thought she could steamroll us forever, but now she knows better. And I've got to say, it feels pretty damn good.